I wanted to share an article, could be an article or some essay or something. The title of it is Caste and Castelessness. It is written by Satish Deshpande, which is towards the biography of general category. So obviously this is an article about caste. If I call it article, it is supposed to be about caste. And it is from pre-independence era to independence, and then to the very modern era we are coming. Very modern andre means we are not talking about EWS and all. We have not come up to that stage. This is quite an old article. It is written by Satish Deshpande, and so some of the key in my perspective, some of the very important parts or sections of the article which I found goes like this, and there are like lot many points coming. And coming to the first one is it talks about a joke, and the joke was popularized 5 or 6 years ago when the 93rd Amendment of Constitution introduced reservation for OBCs in elite educational institutions. So the joke is India decides to send a space exploration team to the moon, and in feverish negotiation begin immediately on the composition of the team, and after much haggling, it is decided to include 9 OBCs and 6 SCs and 3 STs, and if there any place left, then 2 astronauts. Now you have to tell me whether there's what type of analysis do you come up with this joke, and who is the person who is extracting humor from this joke, and on whom the joke is about. So when you come to that analysis, Sir says the fact that astronauts are not identified by their caste. Listen to this, like it's very interesting. The fact that astronauts are not identified by their caste but only by their qualification as astronauts. Whereas the quotawalas identified only by their caste and not by their qualifications. In short, the joke correctly assumes that we will know the caste of the astronauts without being told, but we will agree that it is irrelevant in the face of their qualifications, while simultaneously agreeing that though the quotawalas too would presumably have a qualification, but these are irrelevant in the face of their castes. Imagine. Wow. Like I am a person who finds it very difficult to put such things into words, into literature, and explain them so efficiently that people understand the exact meaning of it, and this fellow has done. It's so impressive for me. So the next comes that when it says, while it is of course necessary to address the question of lower caste and their demands for social justice, we will not get a grip of contemporary complexities of this institution unless we pay close attention to its taken for granted side, namely the naturalization of upper caste as the legitimate inheritors of modernity. Once again, unless we pay close attention to its taken for granted side, namely the naturalization of upper caste as the legitimate inheritors of modernity. So nice. Coming to the provocation of caste, he says, thus one track through sites such as Indian National Congress and its official resolutions. For example, it is clear that the public language in which caste was addressed acquired the motive of abolition very late and only through a very slow and reluctant process. Moreover, caste appeared to be unique in the sense that it was the only all-encompassing institution that was slated for abolition rather than in reform. Now here we are not talking about whether what is correct, abolition is correct or reform is correct. We are talking about the famous narrative which was fed into the society by whom, like obviously the backwards did not have a voice until then. So it was fed by obviously the natural inheritors of modernity, upper castes, the so-called upper castes, and they were the people who were playing the whole political game, whether to make it make it worthy of abolition or worthy of a resolution, a reform. So like you can also learn about his perspective on Gandhi, that how Gandhi was a person who was trying for a very long period of time before, like until his death, like until a small period before his death. So until that point he was trying to stress the point that caste is not worthy of abolition. Anybody who is going to abolish caste is a fool, and I am against that fellow. So Gandhi was a very much he was a person who was wanting to push forward the idea of reform in caste, but as we all know, it did not work out. It did not work out, and at the quite end of his life, when Ambedkar has written his book Annihilation of Caste and many other works and publications and speeches, Gandhi came to an opinion that okay fine, let's come to some agreement that let's abolish caste, something like that. So you can read about those points also in this article. Thus okay, then it says that finally, while everyone had religion, like when we say there's a conflict between caste and religion, which is above? Which is above? Religion or caste? So here religion is above and caste is lower in priority. So here he says finally, while everyone had religion, including the colonizers and others who were undeniably modern, caste was uniquely ours, and it seemed unquestionably unmodern and indeed anti-modern. So by and large, these are like different sections of the article. They are not coming continuously, and there's a context in between them. So what I say obviously loses context and obviously loses sense. So you have to read it on your own to understand what it says. You don't have to just follow what I am saying, because it wouldn't make sense, because it's a cut paths. Now, so by and large, the last thing says, so by and large, campaigns whose stated intentions was to abolish caste were actually designed to prepare caste to meet the modern world as castes. Caste. Array. Then coming to the next section, that is abolition of caste. In that section he says, unlike his more moderate allies in Chatpat Todak Mandal, who were enthusiastic advocates of intermarriage was suggested by Gandhi, and that was like very happily very much followed by other people. But when it came to like the real meaning of what Ambedkar wanted intermarriage to be like, that is between upper caste and the lower caste, that is so the so-called Harijans and the so-called Brahmins, he was suggesting intermarriage between them. And Gandhi was not, in the early ages of his life, he was not suggesting on that. Gandhi was suggesting intermarriage between the sub-caste, that is, all the different castes of the creamy layer of the caste be married Savarna caste, and then OBCs marry between OBCs, and untouchables marry between untouchables. Like the intermarriage with sub-caste, he was not something or whatever. So coming to that fact, like as along with Gandhi, Jatpat Todak Mandal was also the enthusiastic fellow who were advocating of intermarriage, but Ambedkar wanted to attack the ultimate foundation of caste, which is like very offensive for these people. They get so offended, our religious sentiments are hurt. Ambedkar wanted to attack the ultimate foundation of caste, which was believed was located in Hindu religion, especially its revered scriptures. So it was precisely his call to disown the scriptures that alarmed his host in the mandal and led to the withdrawal of his invitation. That is a like very famous kissa, a very famous story. Invitation to address a national convention in 1936. Next comes is a very like my favorite part, that is ambiguity of language was desirable and even sought after because the pervasive nature of the caste. And you can see also the applications of how things were made ambiguous intentionally. The next thing comes is in the final approach towards independence, therefore, these varied positions tend to find expression in similar sounding phrases and slogans that were intentionally vague and imprecise. It is it is no surprise that the constitution makers should have carried these ambiguities into the founding document of the new republic. Now when you come to analysis of constitution, these things are never fucking taught to you. We talked about the criticism of constitution, and we did not talk about different spectacles in which we could analyze the perspective. So that thing did not come to us, and I believe I am uneducated in that part. So coming to the next part, This is a quotation from J.H. Houghton, which is written in Caste, Race and Tribe, which is a census report of 1931. And the census commissioner, he is a census commissioner, and he writes in the chapter 9, I guess, on page number 430, Census of India. He says that as on occasion of each successive census since 1901, a certain amount of criticism has been directed at the census for taking any note of all the facts of caste. It has been alleged that the mere and labeling persons as belonging to a caste tend to perpetuate the system. It is, however, difficult to see why the record of the fact that actually exists should tend to stabilize its existence. It is just as easy to argue with at least as much truth that it is impossible to get rid of any institution by ignoring its existence, like the proverbial ostrich. This is a criticism again by Houghton. And next come the evidence. There is evidence to suggest, therefore, that the possibility of refusing caste identity, at least in response to colonial state. What is being refused? Caste identity. Was already well established by 1930s. Caste was reported extensively by Muslims. Now, this is like a fucking big debate. Nobody would want to admit that caste exists in non-Hindu religions also. They don't want to talk about it. So, the caste was reported extensively by Muslim. Indeed, well over 80% of them reported caste, with 133 castes being exclusively only Muslim. According to 1931 census, the Hindu accounted for 68% of Indian population, while a Muslim had made up to 22.2% of population. And given that the exterior caste, mostly corresponding to the depressed classes, so exterior caste accounted for as much as 21.1% of Hindu population. That is, I think what I have understood is exterior caste refers to the untouchables, that is SC/STs, what in today's modern world, what it has been called is SC/STs. So accounted to much as 21.1% of the Hindu population. So the grant of a separate electorate to them, like what Ambedkar had argued, that we want separate electorate for our people, because we should have a fair share in the nation building, and the nation should be as much ours as it is theirs. So it was not going on majority rule, that if certain house has certain amount of majority and all of them being Brahmins, then they'll take decision for us. No. So separate electorate was such an idea, and if that was granted to them, would greatly reduce the huge Hindu majority, roughly to under 54%. Now again, addition to this, there's something else to come. So we'll discuss about Pune Pact. The Pune Pact of 1932 thus cemented the claims of the Congress and specifically of Gandhi to represent all of India, thus helping to conceal the fact that the leadership was exclusively upper caste, and even more closely guarded public secret that these castes represented a very small minority of Hindu population. Coming to the next, muting of caste identities was thus a necessary precondition for the construction of a Congress majority. Like when you talk about when you come and talk to people who are criticizers of caste, you will see them being disappointed equally with BJP and Congress, like left and right wing, UPA and NDA, equally disappointed, because anyway, wherever you go, the majority is always the Hindu minority, and they are the people who are controlling everything. So this comes to why they are saying the majority vote bank of Congress, who forms it. So I'll read it again. The muting of caste identities was thus a necessary precondition for construction of a Congress majority, a development of immense significance in an emerging era of electoral democracy. Although this was not immediately obvious, the grant of reservation reduced the depressed classes to the status of supplicants, for whom special concession was design made by majority that owned the nation. आज भी हमें वही ट्रीटमेंट मिलता है. Everywhere, wherever you go, वही ट्रीटमेंट मिलता है. You get the same treatment. Fine, whatever. Coming to the next one is caste constitution citizen in the new republic. This is now coming to the after independence era or during independence era, and this ambivalence is translated into constitution. That is whatever this discourse we are talking about, all the confusions and not confusions, the vagueness, the ambiguity, it got translated into the constitution. So it says this ambivalence is translated into constitution through the inclusion of, on one hand, the rights of equality and non-discrimination, on the other hand, the charge of the state to show special consideration for ST/SCs and to socially, educationally backward classes at SCBCs, and more generally to the weaker sections of the society. Now, the whole EWS game was played on the word weaker section, which was placed in the constitution. So here comes the word weaker sections of the society. Coming to the next, by contrast, the biggest boon that the state grants to the upper caste is a guarantee of anonymity in caste terms. The biggest boon that the state grants to the upper caste is a guarantee of anonymity in caste terms. Guarantee of anonymity in caste terms. If you can understand that. Victory in defeat. The next topic, like the section of the article, is victory in defeat. Now this is a very famous, very much referred to case. We come to Champakam Dorai Rajan R. Srinivasan case. Barely 6 months after the Constitutional Republic of India was formally adopted, Madras High Court upheld in July 1950 and the plea of two Brahmin petitioners, that is Champakam Dorai Rajan and R. Srinivasan, who claimed that their fundamental right of equality and non-discrimination guaranteed by constitution were being violated by caste and community quotas then in force. So then an amendment, the first amendment came in place, and how the game was played on that amendment. In reality, the court had been victorious in the defeat. Why? Why victorious in defeat? They had managed to firmly establish the primacy of meritocratic norm over the aberrational status of social justice initiatives. In effect, the new constitution forbade the state to name or act against caste-based privileges or advantage as long as they wore the garb of secular modernity. The court sees this as a clear evidence of injustice against Brahmins. So, referring back to the case, it is, court sees a clear evidence, injustice against Brahmins, with no attempt to reflect on how a republic committed to ending caste inequalities or to deal with a situation where a historically privileged community numbering 3% of population would corner about 62% of seats in state subsidized engineering college. 3% population, 62% seats. Injustice. Very much injustice by unmarking. Is the next section of the article, and it says, while it is not perfectly symmetrical, the situation of lower caste in a study in contrast, the pursuit of their interest requires the mandatory mediation of public politics. Mandatory mediation of public politics, and their needs must be usually be articulated as particularistic demands. So it is like we are taking the burden of hypervisibility of caste. When it comes to caste, only people who are talking with the name of caste is us. In fact, it authored and disseminated a new kind of common sense where the very definition of caste was truncated and equated with the lower caste. Coming to the after Mandal era, that is the Mandal Commission, the famous Mandal Commission. After Mandal Commission, it took some time for the realization to sink in that the OBCs. Now, introduction of OBCs again gave a great, नींद से उठ गए ये लोग वैसा वाला, that type of realization. So, where were we? It took. After Mandal, it says it took some time for realization to sink in that the OBCs too being added to the reserved category, the general category had now been a euphemism for the upper caste. General category was a euphemism for the upper caste. Coming full circle from the issue of the Madras High Court in its Dorai Rajan and Venkataraman decisions of 1951 that quashed the communal goal, the court reiterates that the unreserved of the general category cannot be treated as de facto quota for upper caste. So that is on paper, they argue with that. Soon after, a new civil society initiative led by similar inclined upper caste elite calling themselves as मेरी जाति हिंदुस्तानी was launched. कि caste census क्यों नहीं होना चाहिए? क्योंकि मेरी जाति हिंदुस्तानी. Now you don't want to talk about caste suddenly because once they are successfully interpolated by the ideology of castelessness, upper caste subjects see their caste identities as incidental or irrelevant to the claim. They can thus assert with some sincerity that it is a mere coincidence that everyone who makes such a claim happens to be from upper caste. Coming to the conclusion, the last and the final line that I am going to talk about is being so much of time. So it is hardly surprising that B.R. Ambedkar cherished ideal. Now this is like very summing up, very general. It's not so interesting. It is so hardly surprising that B.R. Ambedkar cherished ideal. The annihilation of caste remains to this day, an inspiring but vague destination without a reliable route map to follow. Okay, thank you.